You're on board the Newstrack. India Today's open source investigation team has been able to access a series of 50 satellite images taken over time, which just show how the de-radicalization or re-education camps of Muslims in Xinjiang have proliferated, how from very small structures they've now become massive compounds, and startling details have emerged about how the atrocities are being perpetrated in these camps. In fact, joining us on this broadcast, live and exclusive from Washington, D.C., is Rushan Abbas, an activist who has been looking very deeply at the pair up and become family, which some activists call China's mass rape program. She's got insights, she'll share those with us. Anant Krishnan joins us, one of India's foremost voices on China. And for a perspective from Beijing, I'm joined on this broadcast by N.R. Tenjen. But first I want to show you this investigative report put together by Colonel Vinayak Bhatt from India Today's open source investigation desk. Here it is.
Under the watch of President Xi Jinping, Beijing has created a sprawling network of internment camps across its far western region of Xinjiang.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allah.
This to tame the region's ethnic Uighur Muslim minorities. India Today's analysis of at least 50 satellite images offers a rare insight into China's oppression. The fortification is high-tech, but no less enslaving than Stalin's Gulag system.
This province has been subject to an unprecedented campaign of internment, sending between 1 and 2 million adults into internment camps in order to indoctrinate them. My research uncovered significant additional evidence based on government documents, notably family planning budgets, family planning reports, policy documents, government data and statistics from government websites on very different administrative levels. This evidence points towards a systematic policy and campaign of subjecting Muslim minorities who have too many children to internment camps, punishing them with internment, punishing them draconically with all kinds of other consequences, subjecting at least 80% of women of reproductive age to long-term effective birth control surgery, which typically consists of either placing intrauterine contraceptive devices or sterilization.
More than 1 million Chinese Uighur Muslims have been imprisoned in these camps. Behind these bulwarked walls, they are forced to sing praises of the communist regime and forced to forsake their religion. Our scrutiny of satellite images reveals these Chinese gulags. They are gated with massive walls, external sentry posts, double-layered wire grills, as high as 15 feet. Housed in these single-storied barracks with red roofs are forced labor camps for Muslim inmates. Images from the construction phase show presence of PLA vehicles around. The projects were carried out under the direct supervision of the Chinese military. The modular design cut short the construction time to within 2 months.
The larger game plan is that the region of Xinjiang is geopolitically strategic, has always been, bordering 8 countries in Central Asia, from Pakistan to Central Asian countries to Russia to Mongolia. This most recent sterilization campaign can be understood as an effort to subjugate the Uyghurs, to bring them under control, to assert control over a population that has been growing faster, harder to track down, and harder to control culturally and spiritually. And the most recent policies are also, I believe, a strategy, unfortunately, of ethno-racial domination.
But China's crackdown on Islam is much wider. Muhammad, Islam, Imam, Saddam, Hajj, Mecca, Medina. For Muslim parents, picking a wrong name for their babies in Xinjiang, especially with religious overtones, could land them and their children in trouble. And if that wasn't enough, the communist regime ordered removal of minarets and domes from the mosques, in what's been an assault on traditional Islamic architecture in the country. The US administration has termed China's treatments of Uyghur Muslims the stain of the century. And the stain must be wiped out from the civilized world. Bureau Report, India Today.
Rushan Abbas is a US-based Uyghur activist. Her family members have been detained in some of these camps in Xinjiang, and she will tell us the story of what's happened with her own near and dear ones. Anant Krishnan joins us, one of India's leading experts on China. With us also on this broadcast is Colonel Vinayak Bhatt from the India Today Open Source Intelligence Desk. He's a military man, has spent his life studying satellite images and helped our team put that investigation together. Inar Tenjen joins us for a perspective from Beijing. Rushan Abbas, I come to you first. Can you explain to our viewers what happened to your family members in these camps and the stories that you yourself have heard of the kind of atrocities that are perpetrated by the Chinese administration in these camps across the province of Xinjiang?
Yes, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak about this genocide of my people. My sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, she is a retired medical doctor, is one of these victims right now being held in those concentration camps. She was abducted by the Chinese government on the 11th of September 2018 as a retaliation for my activism for speaking out about China's human rights abuses in East Turkestan, we call the symbolic name. And officially the Chinese government calls it Xinjiang, which means new territory. I talked about the conditions of the camps and the horrific abuses of the Uyghur Muslims under the current regime at one of the think tanks in Washington, D.C., in the Hudson Institute. So ever since she was abducted, we have no information on her whereabouts and for what reason she's being held. Unfortunately, my family's story is not unique. Under the communist regime since the occupation of our homeland in 1949, the Chinese government has been using different excuses to suppress Uyghur people. Now it came down to actual genocide. Since the 9/11 in 2001, the 9/11 tragedy in the United States, Beijing has been rebranded its repressive campaign against Uyghurs as a part of a global war on terror.
Can I just step in to ask, how are you so sure that your sister has indeed been abducted and is kept by the Chinese government in one of these internment camps?
Because the Radio Free Asia has been trying to find out her whereabouts and doing investigative reporting. Finally, on early June, just about 4 or 5 weeks ago, they got confirmed that she is detained. The only place that Uyghurs disappeared to these days is those concentration camps, because she did not commit any crimes. She's not charged anywhere. She's not in the prison. So I am pretty sure that she is in those camps, because there are more than 3 million Uyghurs are being held in those camps right now. They are being used as slave labor to advancing China's economy, to murder more people.
What are the kind of testimonies you've heard about the nature of atrocities that are perpetrated by the Chinese government, the PLA, its representatives, its officials in these internment camps, which are called re-education camps?
There is a book being released by Dr. Michael Pillsbury, The 100-Year Marathon, and in that the Chinese Communist Party leaders quote that every place could be a battlefield in the future for China's dream to become a global domination. By challenging basically Western democratic countries and systems, and the undermining any kind of rule of law, Beijing is indeed treating every single country as their own battlefield, taking extraordinary measures to target individuals and also the whole government to keep them quiet or bullying them while they are running those massive incarceration camps since the Holocaust. According to witnesses, those concentration camps, people are subject to mental and physical torture. People are given unknown medications that they don't know what they are. And also, they are basically being fed only like 600 calories a day and not getting enough water. So dehydrations, food and sleep deprivations. We do have several female. We do have several female inmates came out of those camps actually testifying that they are subject to forced sterilizations. China's first concentration camp was built under the Strike Hard campaign in 2014. So it has been 6 years now. And the size of the camps has grown more than 500%, 500 times last 2 months alone. According to news accounts and the Chinese government's like construction bids, Chinese government is building crematoriums for a Muslim culture that doesn't practice cremation. The last time the world saw crematoria and the concentration camps together, an outright Holocaust took place. We all know what happened.
Anand Krishnan, not since Hitler or Stalin has the world seen atrocities of this scale. You've been researching and writing a lot about these Xinjiang concentration camps. Try and put them in a historical context for our viewers about the scale of the genocide that's currently being perpetrated by the Chinese government.
Well, Rahul, just to give you an on-the-ground sense, I made 3 visits to Xinjiang in the last 10 years. And all of these visits predated the campaign to build many of these camps, which really took off, as was just mentioned, in 2014 and actually in 2017. And a lot of it was because of the appointment of a new hardline party chief who did a very similar sort of security strategy in Tibet. And now since taking over in Xinjiang, he's taken it to another level. And what I really took away from my 3 visits there, which I also write about in some detail in an upcoming book, is that there was a gradual trend towards securitization of Xinjiang over the last 10 years, starting with the riots of Urumqi in 2009 and following a terror attack in Kunming railway station in 2014. So what was happening was you saw this deployment of security on an unbelievable scale everywhere in Xinjiang. And the most evident sign of that was security cameras literally everywhere. But I think the camps and the building of the camps on this big scale since 2017 was really unprecedented. No one saw it coming. And I think the numbers are staggering in terms of the number of people who've actually passed through these camps. Estimates have ranged. Even the lowest estimates put it close to 1 million. But what is really unclear now, Rahul, is what happens to these detainees. Some are being sent home, but some are being actually sent through the judicial system and being given long sentences. And I think it's pretty clear that there is no due process. And I think the worrying thing, Rahul, is through it all, I think there's been pretty much silence from the international community that's changing now because the US has its own problems with China. And I think we should also note that India has been pretty silent about everything that's been unfolding, especially over the last 3 years.
NR Tenjen? This is China's mass rape program. We are hearing testimonies of physical and mental torture. Not since the Holocaust has the world seen this kind of genocide.
I'd like to point out that your first guest is a member of a group that is advocating for a separate East Turkestan, as she refers to it. I don't know that everything she says is quite believable. Atul is a very, very well-informed individual. I know that he researches things. I don't know that he was able to actually go to these places that people keep calling camps. But I mean, these estimates I find a little bit odd. Today we've heard 1 million to 3 million. But if you actually go back and see where these estimates came from, it all comes down to a guy named Adrian Zenz. Who is Adrian Zenz? I think he was the person who was talking earlier. Interesting fellow. He's funded by the US government and a group that's called Anti-Communist Historical Research Foundation. And in addition to that, he has written a book where he says that he's a born-again Christian, and he doesn't believe that most people will be capable of going up to heaven during the rapture, and that women's rights, gay rights, and also the lack of corporal punishment is the work of the devil on earth. So I don't know that I would necessarily believe things that you do. Even the institutes that he's associated with are more or less defunct. One has a vocational license but does not graduate any students. The other one, as I said, is funded by the US government. So at this point, we don't know. I don't know. I've been to Xinjiang a number of times. They never took me to a place and said, this is the place where they're going to have an re-education program. I do know that there's only, if you took 3 million people away from the general population, it would have a massive impact on the amount of produce and everything that is grown in Xinjiang and shipped throughout China, and that is not true. I also find it hard to believe because last year alone there was 200 million Chinese tourists who were roaming around Xinjiang. Certainly would have noticed if there were some camps that they had seen. So I greet this with a high degree of skepticism. No one has taken me there, but I don't know how this is all possible given the evidence to the contrary.
Colonel Bhatt, Inar Tenjen in Beijing denying completely the existence of these camps, or that 1 to 3 million people have been whisked away.
I said, I don't know.
And casting aspersions and calling speculation the report that you helped put together. How strong is the evidence you believe? Because the satellite maps, while they show how the area that these camps encompass has increased, don't really capture any video evidence of torture.
Rahul, it is very sad that Beijing is denying everything. I really feel the pain of the lady who spoke first, because I am seeing the satellite imagery and you can really make out what exactly the Chinese are doing there. But first things first, today morning, the East Turkestan Government in Exile and East Turkestan National Awakening Movement have filed a petition to the International Criminal Court at Hague, which against the atrocities of the Chinese in this region. Well, the evidence is extremely clear. They must be presenting the evidence that we have presented today on India Today TV. The evidence is so clear that after 2013, when Xi Jinping took over the reins of China, the things have started moving. The concentration camps have proliferated, but they grow exponentially. Only after August 2016, when Tan Juan Ko took over the reins of Xinjiang. He is popularly known as Ko. So that is what I would call him, Tan Juan Ko. The tremendous growth of these concentration camps. Every concentration camp, which number almost more than 180 that are suspected, and 30 of them very clearly indicate that they are concentration camps. There are number of buildings, almost the numbers have increased to 45 buildings, which indicate they are 4 to 5 stories, which indicate almost 9,000 inmates, which they can contain. And none of these camps can remain innocent when the entire power is given to the people who are controlling it, handcuffing, torturing. We've seen
But
video
Rushan
evidence of
Abbas,
all this.
while there's been a lot of reportage in the international press around this, the likes of Einar Tenjan say you come from a separatist movement, you want independence for East Turkestan, and therefore this is part of a political charge that's flung Beijing's way. He's denying, in a sense, that atrocities of this scale are being carried out. He says, I've been to Xinjiang, I haven't seen any of these camps.
Yes, I'm not surprised at all because the Chinese regime is bribing and leveraging some of the scholars and key politicians, decision makers, media, and some influential people around the world, important businessmen around the world. Well, he says he's in Beijing. So with that, I'm not surprised at all because China has not only has successfully silenced international criticism of its shameful human rights record, but also now asking them to speak in their defense. That's why I'm not surprised at all. And let me make that clear. We are not trying to separate East Turkestan from China. East Turkestan was established twice as independent country. So if there is any movement that we are just restoring that the independent East Turkestan. But let me just, well, I am Uighur, yes. If he tried to accuse me for that, let me just ask him, has he ever heard of a person called Sean Zhang, who's a Chinese student in Canada? He is the one actually came up with the first satellite imageries and the reporting this. Well, right now, and also when you look at with the Chinese government's Belt and Road Initiative, which is the main reason why those concentration camps are set up, and also the trade threats to different countries using the trade, China is trying to buy sides of those countries, taking China's side.
Anand Krishnan, how compelling is the evidence? Einar Tenjan debunking the presence of hardcore evidence, suggesting essentially just the fact that you've got these buildings and their size is growing doesn't prove torture.
Well, two things, Rahul. First thing is that it's possible that numbers may be inflated if it's 2 million or 3 million, but I think there's no doubt there's a vast number of people who've gone through these centers. And I would say that even the Chinese government has acknowledged the presence of these centers, which is the most basic fact that we haven't really addressed, though they're calling it vocational training centers. But I think the evidence suggests is, given that I know professors, university presidents, writers, lawyers, who really don't need vocational training, who've been made to go through these centers, not of their own will. I think that really raises questions about what exactly these centers are. And I think as far as I see it, whether it's 200,000 people, forget 2 million people, I think that's 200,000 people too many who've been going through these centers against their will. And I think there's no denying that, even if you quibble about the actual numbers. I think the fact that the network of these centers exists is something that even Chinese state media has reported on, although they claim that these are there to give training to people in Xinjiang. The only point that I would make, Rahul, is I think the easiest way to really make clear what is happening is open up Xinjiang, let journalists go there and report. And I can tell you that journalists who do go there and report find it very difficult to get anywhere near these camps, or even to actually just move around freely in cities like Kashgar or Hotan. You end up being tailed.
Okay, Einar Tenjan, respond to what you're hearing from Anand, from Rushan and from Colonel Bhatt. Allow India Today to come in. Let's find out what's happening in these camps. You and I can go together.
I would welcome that. I have no problem with that. I think a little bit of sunlight is always good. And I think it would dispel a lot of these notions out there that these places are being set up. I don't know what the point of torturing people would be, since that only hardens them. They would come out of such an experience even more radicalized than they went in. And I agree. If people have been swept up and put into the re-education camps who shouldn't be there, somebody should be held accountable. I think that's reasonable. But, you have to understand that the Chinese ends is not to make more problems for themselves. They're immensely practical people. What they want to do is to make sure that a large group of people who are uneducated, do not speak Chinese, would have equal access to society. Because without being able to speak Chinese, without an education, other than going to the local, Imran once a week, you would not be able to get a job. You were basically destined only to be stuck on a farm somewhere because that's all you could possibly do, or be a cook. If China had continued that policy, they would be accused of creating an apartheid state, basically two levels. So they're going to be blamed either way, but I think it's better that they're trying to get people educated and get them to the point where they can support themselves, where they have a future.
You're almost making this sound like this is the erstwhile great white man's burden. This is the Han population's burden to educate the Uyghur population.
I don't think so. I think it's very practical. The white man's burden was to bring religion and their idea of society.
Communist China's propaganda.
But, I think,
please give me.
Rushan,
Please allow me to say something here.
go on, Rushan.
Can I? Okay, this man is repeating what the Hitler did during the World War II, stigmatizing the Jewish culture. And while I'm talking about hundreds and thousands of university professors, medical doctors, famous actors, actresses, complete lie that he's talking about. Why? They are taking the university presidents and the famous writers, the people who worked on the textbooks for years. Those are all in those camps. They are working as
He says, what's the point of putting them in a re-education camp? They'll come out more radicalized than when they went in. It doesn't help China, he argues, because Chinese, he claims, are practical people. Respond to that, Rushan.
Well, Ambassador Cui, the Chinese ambassador to United States, he told the CNN reporters that they are trying to make Uyghurs normal people. Basically, in their eyes, the Uyghurs having their own language, having their ethnic differences, cultural differences, and their religion, they are being treated, they are being viewed as abnormal people. So basically, China's waging war on Islam. That's why those concentration camps are there, to make them atheists, Chinese, basically speaking Chinese, not believing any religion. That's what those concentration camps are for, other than using those Uyghurs as slaves on the production.
Colonel Bhatt, final words. As of now, China is saying we would not do this because each person who comes out would end up more radicalized than when they went in.
Well, actually, that is what is happening today. The families are broken. They're getting signatures from them, and forced confessions are being shown to the world that they are going on their own to these re-education camps. What kind of re-education are you going to give to a person who is 50 years old and educated? That is political indoctrination, nothing else. And in labor camps, they are producing cheap stuff. Blood diamonds. The same thing is happening here in China. China is selling blood goods. The electronics which are coming out of China today are produced in these camps. They should not be purchased by the rest of the world. Rahul?
Okay, Anand Krishnan, in conclusion, what should happen next? Because this denial, the charge, this will continue. Now the United States mounting an extra pressure. The Indian audience also becoming far more aware of the atrocities that are being perpetrated in these camps. How do you believe the truth should really be established, Anand?
Well, Rahul, I think given the attention on the story over the last few months, there have been signs that the Chinese government is feeling some pressure to actually say what is going on, even though it's in a very limited way. That's why you even saw the first acknowledgement from them that these institutes were functioning, these centers were functioning. And I think that they have been trying to reduce the number of people in these camps because of the international attention and pressure. But ultimately, Rahul, I think the system, given that how much they seem to have invested in it, as your images have shown, there's no evidence to suggest they're going to disband this anytime soon. And I think, as you just highlighted earlier in the program as well, I think the best antidote to end this debate would be to open it up, allow journalists to go and report for themselves to see what's exactly going on there. And if people there are indeed of being there of their own free will, are being given due process. And I think a lot of question marks still exist until and unless those questions are going to be
Well,
answered.
NR Tenjan on this show has said sunlight is a good thing. It absolutely is. You can take Ananth Krishnan, you can take anybody else. Let's take a bunch of journalists to these camps. You can join us, NR Tenjan. Then we'll really see what's going on in these concentration camps. You're smiling and laughing, which means you weren't serious about the
I'm
offer.
laughing because I don't set policy for the Chinese government. I'm an American. I have been to Xinjiang. I'm surprised that Anand is saying that there's been no attention. I've seen specials on CCTV, CGTN, all about these camps. People might say
about it. You know what?
But the fact is that, excuse me, you're interrupting me.
Let him speak. Let him speak.
The issue is that, if the Chinese government has acknowledged this from the very get-go, but they see it differently. You say it's a concentration camp, they say it's re-education. You say torture, they say learning. What can I say?
Rushan, final words, 20 seconds.
Okay, look at this picture. Look at this picture. This is my sister. I am carrying her picture, going all around the world, telling the world that my sister is missing for past 23
Can you hold it up? Can you hold it up closer to your face?
Okay, here. Can you see? This is my sister's picture. And those CCTV and the global network you just mentioned, shamelessly accusing me for stealing other people's pictures and saying that those are my missing relatives. I am carrying her picture. There is no need of stealing anybody's picture. And those CCTVs and the Chinese media are accusing me for lying about my missing relatives. And where is my sister? Where is my 57 years old retired medical doctor? Where is my sister? She has 2 daughters in the United States. She has 3 granddaughters that she has not been communicated for past 22 months. This is 21st century. China claims to be having the cutting edge technology. Then why 57 years old retired medical doctor? She's not radicalized. She's not what you are accusing her of. Why is she not calling her daughters for past 22 months since September 2018? Where is she? There are millions of people. There are about 1 million Uyghurs in diaspora. Every one of us are missing relatives at home, relatives from back home. My husband's entire family is missing from Bhutan. You speak to any Uyghurs in diaspora, they are missing. At least 1 or 10 relatives are missing. Where are they? When did you go to China? I am ashamed you being an American, because you are speaking China's fabrications and false narratives here, using the freedom platforms we have. You are defending the defenseless. I can't believe you are calling yourself an American. How about China's paying you for saying all this?
Absolutely not, and I object to your accusation. You're not an American, obviously, and hopefully that will remain the situation.
I am very honored, very proud, patriotic American. Americans speak the truth. Americans don't sell their soul for Chinese money. That's what kind of Uyghur American I am.
Yeah. Well, good luck with your separation policy.
Okay, if you're in Beijing, please ask your friends in the CCP. Ask them, where's my sister? Her name is Dr. Gulshan Abbas. Find out where my sister is, then let's talk again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm out of time. This is an important international investigation we've put out. We will keep following up on these concentration camps. Now, whether it's 1 million or 3 million, even if 100,000 people are in these camps, that's unacceptable. And this whole policy of mass rape, getting handmen to marry forcibly, and that's led to all kinds of problems as well, with Uyghur Muslim women complaining of being raped by handmen who make the promise of marriage and then pull back. We'll track this story very, very closely. Rushan Abbas, we thank you very much for having come on our network, shared your story. Now, your sister's story is something that every single person who's watched this broadcast will track as well. Colonel Bhatt, for having put this story together for India Today, thank you. Thanks, Anand, for joining us with your valuable perspective. And NR Tenjan, as always, for coming and giving us a voice from Beijing. Appreciate your presence.